just to get our minds thinking on the science part again. And so the science is essentially going beyond what we've always known as the matter state. And we're beginning to understand that it's not magic. It's just and it's what we have not understood as yet. And as we're beginning to unfold and understand the science, it becomes a bit more clearer. And we begin to understand that everything in this universe and beyond is made of these fields. And we have the principle of the magnetical and gravitational, the mag-rav fields. And we know that everything is a dynamic interaction of these fields, and we only see these fields when they slow down enough to become the matter state for our eyes can see. And when we review a small review of part 2 that we dealt with, plasma can be made of millions and millions of fields that come together and interact continuously. So when we looked at from the cells in our body to the galaxy, the universe, all is a plasma and operates in the same way. And the whole universe is built on these interactions of these fields. They're in constant motion, going from one place to another, depending on their strength and depending on their position. Right, so now we're going to continue. And today we're going to have a look a bit more in detail at the magnetic rays and plasmatic magnetic fields and what they mean and what are they. Before we start, will you be able to play that video, Flint, just to refresh everybody?
Yeah, just getting it around here.
Caught you off guard. Put it very early.
Yeah. So what we have here is a animation, of course, that shows a plasma ray interacting with other rays to form plasma entity.
Thanks, Flint. It was just a bit of a refresher, just to so that people know what we are going to be talking about next. Okay, so we've watched that video, and what we're going to go into a bit more detail and a bit of understanding is what are these magnetic rays that come together and form the plasma. What they can be are essentially the individual and directional magnetic forces. So if we have a look at what this ray is, in the center, we call it the principal matter or the very principal field. And around that is the transition, and then you get the matter on the outside. So it's composed of three different sort of field strengths, and it's in an elongated form. And you'll see it's got a north and a south on that elongated form. So in that shape, it would look like a bar magnet with your north and south. And when you look at the cross-section side of it, it also has the north and south. So these magnetic rays are the individual rays that come together. So another way of explaining them is it's a cylindrical version of the spherical plasma, like the proton or an electron. And this magnetic ray is in possession of its own magnetic and gravitational fields, and hence has its own magnetosphere. So it's only in a cylindrical shape compared to the round plasma. Otherwise, it can essentially be that plasma, but it's the plasma in motion, which is what we call it, the magnetic ray. And the plasma takes the shape of a ray when it travels from one point to another. And the important part here is that the magnetic ray will possess the same magnetical gravitational properties as its source. So whether it be the sun or ourselves, it possesses those fields which come out from that original source. So then the next question comes to mind as to where do these magnetic rays come from? And in our solar system, principally from our sun. Sorry, there's a bit of a delay in our slides coming through. So when we have a look at the sun and the earth as two separate plasmas, the sun is giving fields into its environment, and essentially what is not needed is taken back in on a continuous basis. So that's we've understood before. The fields that are given into the environment of the solar system will travel from the sun to the outer edges of our solar system and back towards the sun. Because if we've got to view the sun as the principal field of our solar system, so the magnetic rays coming from the sun will travel to the outer reaches of our solar system, which we can view as a plasma, and what is not, and these will come back in again if it's not needed beyond the solar system. So it's these magnetic rays which are given off from the sun, which interacts with all the other plasmas, be it the earth. So one has to take a view that our solar system operates just like a smaller plasma. And when the magnetic rays from the sun reach the magnetosphere of our solar system, and it then flows back into the sun. And we've got obviously the different planets in different positions within that solar system. But in that, essentially the magnetic rays are traveling from the central sun out and back in again. So the void in outer space is filled with these magnetic rays and plasmatic magnetic fields, which we will explain. And it's even here the same on Earth as in outer space. This empty space around us is filled with magnetic rays and plasmatic magnetic fields. And I've just used this photograph to illustrate with it raining that we can see these rain drops all around us. And if one had to try and visualize what these fields around us would be like, I can only just try and illustrate it as rain that's falling down. It's something that we can see that fills everything around us.
Another good example would be the rainbow.
Yes, yeah. Right, so I'm going to just read a quote. There are no regions in space, in the universe, which are void of magnetic rays or plasmatic magnetic fields, and their gravitational interactions and attractions with respect to one or more magnetic field or magravs, depending on their proximity with respect to each other. It's a bit of a complicated quote, but it is essentially saying that nothing is void of these fields, and it's, even though we don't see them, they are in constant motion around us. These rays also come from the central sun of our galaxy and our universe. So we have to also say that the magnetical rays of different strengths are given off from the sun, the galaxy, and the universe. There is no one which has identical strength. So we have billions and billions of rays of all different strengths given off from the sun and the central galaxy and the universe. And then we go into the next understanding of what plasmatic magnetic fields are. So plasmatic magnetic fields are detached from their source of creation, hence the use of the term plasmatic. For these magnetic fields and an environment containing a certain amount of rays of magnetic fields. So plasmatic refers to a collection of dynamic magnetic fields. So this is the soup of fields from which everything is created. So in plasma science, calls these plasmatic magnetic fields, or abbreviation PMTIC. So when one starts understanding and reading the books and a lot of the teachings, the public teachings, and even in the private teachings, you'll see that Mr. Kesh refers to a lot of these abbreviations, and so one has to start understanding these to really understand what is being taught. And so a simple definition, a simple understanding of what plasmatic magnetic fields are is that they are a dynamic collection of magnetic rays. So we now know that we have these magnetic rays out there, and we have a collection of these rays that might be of similar strength, which we'll call plasmatic magnetic fields. So now, with our magnetic rays, we've got to look at how a plasma is formed and what is involved. So we get at least two magnetic rays interacting in a dynamic way, build the next larger entity known as a magnetic field. So we're going to explain that. As was shown in the video, you have the magnetic rays coming and interacting. So you get the rays of similar or very similar strengths come and start interacting with each other, and you get the beginning of the creation of a plasma. Because if one views these magnetic rays as tiny little elongated magnets that can come together and start interacting and creating that dynamic interaction between the two. So in this essence, we have the initial seed of that plasma that's created. And when you have the two interacting magnetic rays, it leads to the creation of a magnetosphere with its own magnetical and gravitational field strength. So that tiny little entity now has its own magnetical gravitational strength from the combination of the two, creates it's a new strength. So now this plasma with its own specific magnetical gravitational field strength will now start interacting with other rays and plasmatic magnetic fields to build a larger entity. It's more interaction of these fields. Now this is just a very simple basic understanding. The process is a lot more complicated, but I'll try and keep it simple so that people can understand the very basics. The books go and a lot of the workshops go into a lot more detail, but hopefully this just gives people an idea. So these magnetic rays or fields and their collection as plasmatic magnetic fields become known as the initial fundamental particles. Therefore, we consider magnetic fields to be the real fundamental particles in the world of creation, because they're all around us, and it's this interaction of them that starts creating that initial seed of the plasma, which can lead to the creation of a new planet somewhere. And these magnetic rays can also be called the fundamental particles, which come together to create the initial seed of a neutron. And our current science and understanding will call it a fundamental particle, but it's just the interaction of these magnetic rays will lead to everything that we see around us. It's this interaction and forming a dynamic interaction between all these fields creates and under the certain conditions will manifest what is needed in that condition. So it's essentially the world that we don't see. The existence of magnetic gravitational forces and the existence of a magnetosphere of the plasma confirm the existence and interaction of at least two plasmatic magnetic field forces within that structure. So all the magnetic fields and plasmatic magnetic fields are dynamic and in a state of motion constantly. So these magnetic fields are always attracted by or interacting with other magnetic entities. Thus, they're always on the move towards or repulsing from one magnetic field to another. So what we see with our eyes around us is very much static motion of the universe, but what we don't see is in constant motion. So in other words, what we see as the plants and animals around us, we would consider that static motion, but what we don't see beyond that is in constant motion and interaction. So essentially, our magnetic rays and the collection of magnetic rays are essentially the building blocks of our universe and all that we see. So everything stems from the interaction of these fields. So the vastness of what we don't see contains these magnetic rays. And when these magnetic rays start interacting with other rays of similar strength, they're called plasmatic magnetic fields, independent and constantly moving and interacting. So essentially plasma moving from one point to another. And so from a large plasma like the sun, we get the magnetic rays, and the rays of similar strength form plasmatic magnetic fields, and under the right conditions, these start to interact to form a new plasma.